My name is Richard P. Patterson, and I was born in Dayton, Ohio, and I was raised in the village of Wilberforce, Ohio, which also happens to be the home of three historically Black institutes of higher learning: Wilberforce University, Central State University, and Payne Theological Seminary. Uh, my wife is Carolyn Myers Patterson. We've been married for over 53 years. And I'm going to tell you the story of my great-grandfather, C.R. Patterson, his son, Frederick Douglass Patterson, and the Patterson Greenfield Buggy Company, and also Patterson Greenfield Automobile and Bus Company. So C.R. Patterson, my great-great-grandfather, was born a free man in Bedford, Virginia in 1833. And I always when I talked to my dad, he always said his dad was a free man. And I was thinking as a young person, he was born into slavery. But when I checked it out, he was actually born a free person. And his parents, he was also one of 13, he was the first of 13 children of Charles Patterson and Nancy Patterson. And they left Virginia in 1840. CR was born in 1833, so he left Virginia in 1840, and they moved to Ohio, crossing the Allegheny Mountains and the slave state of West Virginia. And they settled in a small village called Greenfield, Ohio, which was on the Underground Railroad. And one of the interesting things about my great-grandfather is everybody said that he had to swim the Ohio River when he came to freedom. And he was 8 years old at the time, and the Ohio River was probably at least a half-mile wide at the time. And so it's probably impossible for an 8-year-old to swim that far at that time. So they took a ferry. Anyhow, CR's father was a blacksmith, and he taught his first three sons the blacksmithing trade. And around 1860 or so, CR started blacksmithing for a company called Daines and Simpson of Greenfield, and they were a carriage company maker, a carriage builder at that time. And he started as a blacksmith, and he worked his way up to being foreman of the company. And as the company grew, he also grew with it, and he recognized that he wanted to own his own company at some time. And in the mid 1870s, he and a friend, James Lowe, formed the James Lowe Carriage Company, and CR was a partner in that particular company. He wasn't listed as a partner because he was a black man, but they worked together, and eventually CR bought out James and started the CR Patterson and Sons Company. But in the CR married Betty Esteline Postel on July 4th in 1864. And they had 6 children: Mary, Nellie, Frederick, my grandfather, Dolly, Samuel, and Kate. And Frederick Douglass, his first son, was very athletic and also very mechanical. And Frederick Douglass graduated. He was the first African American to graduate from Greenfield High School. He finished the 8th grade, the colored middle school in Greenfield, and he received high enough grades where his teacher promoted him to high school. At the time, there was no black high school. So CR sued the Highland County School Board, and took about a year, but he won his suit. And it's interesting as you go through, and I have the records of the court filings, and the same reasons that they use today, they used back in 1860s to keep African Americans out of school, that they were separate but equal and whatnot. Anyway, Frederick Douglass graduated from Greenfield High School, and he also graduated valedictorian. And he went on to Ohio State University, where he was the first African American to integrated their football team, but also their baseball team. And he was the first black quarterback at Ohio State. And you have to remember, at that time, they were running the single wing. So he had a really outstanding career at Ohio State. He was actively involved in student government. He was the junior class president. He worked on the college newspaper. He was just actively involved in the whole campus life. And he left Ohio State after his junior year, and he got a position in Kentucky teaching history. And so he went to Kentucky and started teaching history. And then he started teaching history, and he met a young lady by the name of Esteline Betty Postel, and they ended up getting married, and that's where that union produced my father and my uncle, and they continued. Okay, yeah, he taught for 5 years in Kentucky, but in the meanwhile, his younger brother Samuel was working in the factory with my dad, or with his grandfather, with his dad, and Samuel became ill, and Frederick came back and to help with that. And Samuel, which is a completely different story, passed away at the age of 24. And they said he committed suicide, but that is circumspect because he was found in Paint Creek, but he also had a rope around his neck. So that's another whole story. But in, let me turn it over back this way. Oh, see, okay. In CR came and started work. Frederick Douglass came and started working in the plant in 1898, and they were producing buggies. At that time, they were producing about 400 buggies per year, and one of their most popular buggies was a doctor's buggy, and it was sold throughout the Midwest into Kentucky, into Tennessee, into Indiana and Illinois. And they were doing quite well. Actually, in the in the late 1890s, they were averaging about $75,000 a year in profits. And Frederick Douglass recognized in the early 1900s that more and more people were driving automobiles. And he talked to his father, CR, and they decided to look into the building of automobiles. And in 1915, the CR Pattersons and Sons produced their first automobile on September 23rd of 1915. First CR Patterson automobile rolled off the assembly line. And they had two models, a touring car and I forget what the other one was. But they had the two models, and they produced the cars for about 5 to 6 years. And the Frederick Douglass recognized that they came a little bit too late to the automobile industry. But at that time, Ohio had passed a law stating that every child that lived more than 2 miles from school would receive transportation by at the expense of the school board. And so at that time, the CR Patterson and Sons Company began producing buses and trucks. And at that time, and I think behind me, you can see a picture of the buses. There's CR Patterson, the buses that they made, 2 automobiles that they made, and then Frederick Douglass Patterson, who is my grandfather. And so they started building buses. They built the first bus that was used by the city of Cincinnati for their city transportation. And they built buses from 1915 on up into 1939. One thing, when I was in high school, my high school principal stopped me one day in the hall and asked me, was I related to the Pattersons that built buses? And I told him yes. And he said that when he was going to Ohio University, he drove a Patterson bus to help pay for his college education. So in the mid 1900s, they produced automobiles. One of the things that fascinates me about the history of the Patterson company is the fact that they did a lot of advertising, and they advertised in the medical journals. There was a Black medical journal at the time. There was also the Crisis magazine, which was by the NAACP, and in local newspapers. And in the history of the company, there was over 1,207 different advertisements that they placed. And they actually did specific advertising, which I thought was unique. They advertised one type of buggy and automobile to the doctors who were the American Medical Association, and they advertised differently just to the general public. So I found that fascinating that back in the early 1900s, Frederick Douglass was bright enough to recognize that. In the mid 1920s, the company was making $150,000 a year in profits. And this was kind of unique at the time, because in today's money, that was like $1 million a year in profits. And because there was no foundry in Greenfield or even in Columbus or whatnot, what the company would do is they would buy frames from Ford, Dodge, Chevy, and they would buy the frames, and then they would build specific cars for their customers based upon what the customer wanted. So it was actually a custom shop from the very beginning of the company, as that people would build their own cars. They built trucks specifically for the International Harvester Company. I have a photo of trucks. There's over a dozen trucks that were ready for delivery to International Harvester. They also built special moving vans they built specific trucks for Allied Van Lines, who were the moving company, and they had specific modifications that they made for the truck, so that they could strap the items into the truck so they didn't move around and break. CR passed away in 1910. Frederick Douglass, my grandfather, was at a meeting with a school board, and was getting an order for some new buses, and he suffered a stroke, and he passed away after 4 days. And actually, when his driver was bringing him back to Columbus, or bringing him back to Greenfield, he had to pass the Ohio State University Hospital, which he could have gone to and gotten some treatment, but at that time they weren't accepting colored folks into the hospital. And after he passed away, my grandmother, Betty Esterly, was running the company, and that's when they started to have a problem getting finances, because what they would do to help with their financial situation, they would show the contracts that they had, and they would get loans from the bank to pay for the production of the trucks or buses or whatever they were doing. And in going through the history, they had over 30 loans from different banks in the area, and the history shows that they had loans that were good for 3, 4, 5 years, but oftentimes they would pay them off within the first year of the loan, or within the first 2 years of the loans. And so they had a really good reputation as far as paying off their loans for the company. After Frederick Douglass passed, and then I mentioned that his wife took over the company, they continued to build buses and bodies. And actually in 1929, they were actually, which is the start of the Depression, they were still financially successful at that time. But also at that time, my dad tells me this, my uncle tells me this, who both worked in the company. My dad was the designer, and my uncle was one of the salesmen for the company. and said that the bank stopped loaning them money, and the company closed in 1939. But from 1865, 64, 65 until 1939, the C.R. Patterson and Sons produced buggies, wagons, school buses. They produced mail carriers and specific cars and buses for different communities in the company. One of the things that in the 1923 or so, they had an order for some buses for the country of Haiti. And so they actually built 6 buses for Haiti, and they drove them to New York to be shipped to Haiti. So it was really interesting that they got orders from different parts of the country, but it's a part of American history that people aren't aware of. And so in 1939, the company closed. I wasn't born until 1942. And I never got to meet my grandfather or my grandmother. But my dad and my aunt and my uncle all worked in the factory and for the company. And as a young person, I would ask them questions, and they would tell me these stories about how they designed, built, and delivered cars, buggies, and trucks to everybody in the United States. Thank you very much.